Pick a beauty, not a beggar. They mocked until the billionaire chose the homeless black girl. In a room filled with the rich and glamorous, one act of defiance shocks everyone. A powerful billionaire ignores the perfect beauty society expects him to choose, and instead takes the hand of a girl from the streets. The crowd laughs, the cameras flash. But what begins as humiliation turns into something no one could have predicted. Because this girl carries secrets and a strength that could change his life forever. As scandal erupts, reputations crumble, and hearts collide. What happens when the world's cruelest judgment meets the purest act of courage? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, their sparkle matched only by the glittering jewelry and polished smiles of New York City's elite. The soft strains of a string quartet floated through the air, mingling with practiced laughter and the gentle clink of champagne glasses. Marcus Hale adjusted his bow tie, feeling the weight of his tailored tuxedo like armor. At 45, he cut an impressive figure, tall, distinguished, with silver threading through his dark hair, but his eyes held a weariness that even his billions couldn't erase. Another year, another gala, he murmured to himself, nodding mechanically at familiar faces. The Hale Foundation's annual charity event had become just another obligation, empty of the passion that once drove him. Since losing Sarah, his wife, these gatherings felt hollow. A sudden flutter of movement near the side entrance caught his attention. A young black girl, no more than 20, had slipped inside. Her thin jacket was frayed at the edges, and her shoes were worn nearly through. She stood frozen at the edge of the ballroom, like a sparrow among peacocks. The whispers started immediately. Who let her in? Security must be slipping. The nerve of some people. Marcus watched as the girl, despite her obvious discomfort, lifted her chin with quiet dignity. There was something in her stance that spoke of strength beneath the vulnerability. The master of ceremonies tapped his microphone, drawing everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've all been waiting for. Tonight's highlight, our annual sponsorship selection. Our generous patrons will choose young women to mentor through our empowerment program. Several debutantes stepped forward, perfectly coiffed and practiced in their presentation. A group of professional models, invited for the occasion, posed elegantly. Then came the cruel shout from the crowd, "Pick a beauty, not a beggar." Laughter rippled through the room. The girl by the door flinched, but didn't run. Marcus saw her hands ball into fists at her sides. Something snapped inside him. He remembered Sarah's words from years ago. What good is wealth if we don't use it to make a real difference? Without hesitation, Marcus crossed the ballroom floor. The crowd parted before him, whispers following in his wake. He approached the young woman, noting how she tensed, ready for more mockery. Instead, he extended his hand. "I'm Marcus Hale." Her eyes widened with recognition of the name, but she didn't cower. "Tiana Johnson," she replied, her voice soft, but steady. "I choose her," Marcus announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. The string quartet fell silent. Glasses stopped mid-clink. Tiana's hand trembled slightly as she placed it in his, but her gaze remained direct. "Why?" she whispered. "Because true beauty isn't found in designer dresses," he answered quietly. Camera flashes erupted around them as reporters recognized the magnitude of the moment. Marcus Hale, billionaire philanthropist, choosing a homeless girl over socialites and models. It was the scandal of the season. But as Marcus led Tiana past the shocked faces and judgmental stares, he felt more alive than he had in years. Sarah would have been proud of this moment. The crowd's gasps and murmurs followed them across the marble floor, but Marcus kept his head high and his grip gentle but firm on Tiana's hand. Tomorrow, the headlines would scream about this choice. Tonight, he had finally done something real. Morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows of Marcus Hale's Central Park penthouse, casting long shadows across the pristine marble floors. The spacious dining room, usually empty save for Marcus himself, now held two people sitting in weighted silence. Tiana perched uncomfortably on the edge of her chair, dressed in borrowed clothes from Mrs. Rivera, the housekeeper, a simple blue blouse and black slacks that didn't quite fit right. Her fingers fidgeted with a cloth napkin in her lap, her eyes darting between the elaborate breakfast spread and the door, as if planning an escape route. Marcus watched her over the rim of his coffee cup. "The eggs are getting cold," he said gently. "Why am I here?" Tiana blurted out, her voice tight with suspicion. "Is this some kind of charity case to make yourself feel good?" Marcus set down his cup carefully. "No, I saw something in your eyes last night, courage. The kind that comes from fighting battles nobody knows about." Tiana's shoulders tensed. "You don't know anything about me." "You're right," Marcus agreed. "But I'd like to, if you'll let me." The honest simplicity in his tone seemed to catch her off guard. She picked up her fork, taking a small bite of scrambled eggs. The tension in her face eased slightly at the taste of warm food. "When was the last time you had a proper meal?" Marcus asked. Tiana's fork paused halfway to her mouth. 3 days ago, at the shelter on 42nd Street. "Tell me about yourself, Tiana. Whatever you're comfortable sharing." She was quiet for so long Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she began. "My mom died when I was 14. Cancer. No insurance." She took a shaky breath. "My mom's boyfriend. He started getting violent after she was gone. One night, it got bad. Really bad. I ran." Marcus's hands tightened around his coffee cup, but he kept his voice steady. "How long have you been on the streets?" 4 years. I bounce between shelters when there's space. When there isn't." She shrugged, trying to make it seem casual. But Marcus saw the pain she was trying to hide. "I'm good at finding warm corners." A protective instinct Marcus hadn't felt in years surged through him. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed aggressively. He glanced at the screen. 27 missed calls from board members and business associates. "Excuse me," he said, reaching for the morning paper that had just been delivered. His stomach dropped as he saw the headlines splashed across the front page. "Billionaire chooses beggar over beauties." "Hale's shocking charity gala stunt." "Marcus Hale's mystery girl, from streets to society." The photos showed him leading Tiana across the ballroom, her worn clothes stark against the luxury surrounding them. His phone buzzed again, another board member demanding answers. "I should go," Tiana said quietly, reading his expression. "I know this was just. I don't know what this was, but you don't need this kind of trouble." Marcus looked up from the paper to see her starting to rise. "Sit down, please," he said firmly. "You haven't finished your breakfast." "But your reputation." "My reputation can handle it." He folded the newspaper deliberately, placing it face down on the table. But the words burned in his mind, along with the growing list of missed calls. He'd known there would be consequences to his impulsive decision, but seeing the cruel headlines, feeling the weight of judgment from his peers, it hit harder than he'd expected. Still, watching Tiana slowly sink back into her chair, seeing the mix of wariness and hope in her eyes, he couldn't bring himself to regret his choice. Even as his phone continued its relentless buzzing, Even knowing he'd become a target of ridicule in his social circles, something told him he'd made the right decision. The morning sun continued to pour through the windows, illuminating them both, the billionaire and the girl from the streets, sharing a quiet breakfast, while the world outside buzzed with scandal. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Marcus's penthouse as he led Tiana down a corridor lined with elegant artwork. "The guest house is through here," he said, opening French doors that led to a private garden. "You can stay as long as you need." Tiana wrapped her arms around herself, still wearing Mrs. Rivera's borrowed clothes. "I don't want charity," she said quietly, "and I can't. I won't owe you anything." Marcus stopped walking, turning to face her. "This isn't about owing anyone anything. It's about having a safe place to rest while things settle down." The guest house was a cozy cottage nestled at the far end of the garden, with climbing roses framing its windows. Inside, warm wooden floors and comfortable furniture created a welcoming atmosphere, far removed from the main penthouse's formal elegance. "Just a few days," Tiana conceded finally, but her eyes revealed how desperately she wanted to believe in this offer of sanctuary. As evening approached, Marcus found Tiana sitting on a stone bench in the garden, a worn notebook clutched to her chest. He settled beside her, careful to leave space between them. "The roses are pretty here," she said softly, her fingers tracing the edge of her notebook. "What's in there?" Marcus asked, nodding toward the book. Tiana hesitated, then slowly opened it. "Just some sketches. Nothing special." But as she turned the pages, Marcus's eyes widened. Detailed drawings filled each page, city scenes, captured in remarkable detail, portraits of children playing in parks, even quick studies of pigeons strutting along sidewalks. Each drawing showed not just skill, but a deep understanding of the subject's essence. "Tiana, these are extraordinary," Marcus breathed. "How long have you been drawing?" "Forever," she shrugged, trying to downplay her talent. "It helps. When things get hard, makes me feel like I can create something beautiful, even when everything else is ugly." "This isn't just a hobby," Marcus insisted. "This is a gift." Before Tiana could respond, music suddenly blared from the penthouse. Mrs. Rivera had turned on the evening news. A familiar gossip show's theme song drifted through the open doors. Breaking news in the scandal that's gripping New York's elite. The host's voice rang out. Billionaire Marcus Hale shocked society by choosing a homeless girl at last night's charity gala. Sources close to the widower suggest he's grown increasingly lonely since his wife's death, but has his desperation to find company led him to be manipulated? Our expert panel weighs in. Cruel laughter and mocking commentary filled the air. Tiana's hands began to shake, her notebook falling to the ground as tears spilled down her cheeks. "What have I done?" she whispered. "Your whole life, your reputation, I'm destroying everything." She tried to stand, to run, but Marcus moved quickly, kneeling in front of her on the garden path. Gravel bit into his knees through his expensive suit pants, but he didn't care. "Listen to me," he said firmly, looking up into her tear-stained face. "Those people, their opinions mean nothing. Nothing. They've never known real struggle, real pain. They've never had to fight for survival like you have. But they're right about me," Tiana choked out. "I'm nobody. I'll only bring you down." Marcus reached for her notebook, picking it up and holding it between them. "The person who created these drawings is not nobody. You have a gift, Tiana, a beautiful soul that those people can't begin to understand." "Why are you doing this?" she asked through her tears. "Why risk everything for someone like me?" "Because I made you a promise when I took your hand last night," Marcus said softly. "And I'm making you another one now. I will never abandon you, no matter what the world says. We'll face their judgment together." The garden grew quiet except for the distant sound of traffic and Tiana's slowly steadying breaths. The cruel voices from the TV continued to drift out, but they seemed to lose their power in the face of Marcus's unwavering support. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows of Marcus's sleek black SUV as they drove through the city. Tiana sat quietly in the passenger seat, watching the buildings pass by. "There's something I want to show you," Marcus said, turning onto a street lined with brick buildings. "One of our community centers." They pulled up to a renovated warehouse, with colorful murals decorating its walls. Children's laughter echoed from inside as they walked through the doors. "Mr. Hale." Several kids rushed over, their hands covered in paint. Marcus greeted them warmly, introducing Tiana. "We're painting the new music room," a little girl announced proudly, tugging at Marcus's sleeve. "Want to see?" As they followed the children, Tiana's steps slowed, her eyes fixed on a familiar poster on the wall. Young Artists Program. Free art classes and supplies. I knew about this program," she whispered, touching the paper with trembling fingers. "I used to walk by here every day, watching the kids inside. I wanted so badly to join, but I was too ashamed. Thought they wouldn't want someone like me." Marcus watched her face soften as they entered the music room. Children sat cross-legged on drop cloths, painting bright designs on the walls. Their art teachers moved among them, offering gentle guidance and encouragement. "You could teach here," Marcus said quietly. "Your talent shouldn't be hidden in that notebook." Tiana's eyes widened. For the first time, he saw a spark of hope replace the wariness in her expression. She knelt beside a small boy, struggling with his paintbrush, showing him how to mix colors on his palette. Later that afternoon, Marcus sat in his office's conference room, facing 8 stern faces around the polished table. The board of directors had called an emergency meeting. "This is about credibility, Marcus," Richard Chen, the head of the board, said sharply. "Our corporate donors are concerned about the foundation's image." "That girl is a liability," Margaret Wilson added, her pearls clicking as she shook her head. "The media circus around her is overshadowing our actual work." "Our actual work." Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. "Like the community center I visited this morning, where children from all backgrounds can find safety and purpose." "Don't be naive," Richard snapped. "Those programs need funding. Funding will lose if you continue this association with her. You need to distance yourself immediately." Marcus stood slowly, placing both hands on the table. "I've listened to your concerns. Now you listen to me. That girl has more courage and talent than anyone in this room. I won't abandon her to protect your comfort zones." "Marcus, be reasonable," Margaret began. "No." He walked to the door, then turned back. "If you want my resignation, you'll have it, but I won't stop helping Tiana." That evening, Marcus and Tiana sat at the kitchen table, takeout containers between them. He told her about the board meeting, watching her face fall with each word. "They're right," she said finally, pushing her food away. "You don't have to do this. Don't ruin everything you've built just for me. I'm not worth." "Stop." Marcus leaned forward, meeting her eyes. "You're worth more than everything I own." Tiana froze, her fork halfway to her plate, as the weight of his words filled the quiet kitchen. For the first time since that night at the gala, she didn't look away from his gaze, letting herself believe that maybe, just maybe, someone truly saw her worth. The morning sun cast long shadows across Fifth Avenue as Marcus's car pulled up to an elegant boutique. Its window displays showcased flowing dresses and tailored suits, The kind of clothes Tiana had only seen in magazine pages blown across empty streets. "I can't go in there," she whispered, shrinking back in her seat. She tugged at the borrowed blouse that hung loose on her thin frame. Marcus opened her door with gentle insistence. "Yes, you can. Everyone deserves clothes that make them feel confident." The boutique's bell chimed as they entered. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and plush cream carpets muffled their footsteps. A saleswoman approached with a practiced smile that faltered when she saw Tiana's worn shoes. "We're closed for a private appointment," she started to say, but Marcus cut her off. "Yes, my appointment. Miss Johnson needs a complete wardrobe." The next hour passed in a blur of soft fabrics and careful measurements. Tiana's fingers traced delicate stitching on blouses that cost more than she'd ever held in her hands. Each time she protested the price, Marcus would shake his head. "Try it on," he encouraged. "If you like how it feels, it's yours." Slowly, Tiana emerged from the dressing room in fitted jeans and a deep purple sweater that brought out warm undertones in her skin. For the first time in years, she stood straight in front of the mirror, barely recognizing herself. "Now that," Marcus said softly, "is the real you showing through." They left with bags full of clothes, practical pieces, mixed with a few special items that had made Tiana's eyes light up, but their peaceful moment shattered as they stepped outside. "Mr. Hale, over here. Is she your new charity case? How much is he paying you, sweetheart?" Camera flashes exploded around them. Reporters thrust microphones forward, their questions turning cruel. Tiana froze, clutching her shopping bags like shields. Marcus wrapped a protective arm around her shoulders. "Head down," he murmured. "Just walk to the car." More voices shouted, their words cutting like knives. "Gold digger. Publicity stunt. What would your late wife think, Marcus?" They made it to the car, Marcus blocking Tiana from the cameras until she was safely inside. The drive home was silent, her hands trembling in her lap. That evening, Tiana sat curled in an oversized armchair in the guest house. Still wearing her new purple sweater, the shopping bag sat unopened by the door. "I don't know how to handle all this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The clothes, the cameras, people thinking the worst." Marcus sat across from her, his tie loosened after the long day. "I know it's overwhelming, but don't let them dim your light." He reached for a leather-bound journal on the coffee table. "Here, write down your dreams, the real ones, not what anyone else thinks they should be." Tiana took the journal, running her fingers over its smooth cover. "Even if they're impossible, especially then." She stared at the blank page for a long moment before picking up the pen. Her hand moved slowly, forming careful letters. "I want to help people like me." Marcus watched as she continued writing, her shoulders gradually relaxing. The evening light faded to dusk, and Tiana's eyes grew heavy. She curled deeper into the chair, her sketchbook falling open across her lap as sleep overtook her. Looking at her peaceful face, Marcus felt something shift in his heart. This young woman, whom society had labeled a beggar, possessed more strength and grace than any of his wealthy associates. In sleep, her walls down, she looked both younger and wiser than her years, a survivor with an unbroken spirit. Morning light filtered through stained glass windows as Marcus's car pulled up to Hope Community Church. The brick building stood humble but welcoming, its wooden doors worn from years of serving as sanctuary to those in need. Tiana shifted nervously in her seat. "You don't have to come in with me." "I want to," Marcus said softly, noticing how her fingers twisted the hem of her new sweater. Inside, the scent of coffee and fresh bread filled the air. A tall man with kind eyes and graying temples approached them, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile. Tiana, we've missed you. Pastor Elijah Carter extended his hand first to her, then to Marcus. And who is this? Marcus Hale. He introduced himself simply, without mention of his wealth or status. I'm here with Tiana. The pastor's eyes showed recognition, but he merely nodded. Welcome to Hope. We're just setting up for lunch service. Women working in the kitchen called out greetings when they saw Tiana. Child, where have you been? One asked, wrapping her in a motherly hug. Marcus watched as Tiana's usual guardedness melted away, her smile reaching her eyes for the first time he'd seen. Can I help? She asked, already reaching for an apron. Of course, honey. You remember where everything is. Marcus stood back, amazed as Tiana transformed. She moved through the kitchen with purpose, directing volunteers, organizing serving stations, and greeting each person who came through the line with genuine warmth. Her natural leadership emerged effortlessly, born from understanding rather than authority. She's always had a gift for this, Pastor Carter said, appearing beside Marcus. Even when she came here for meals herself, she'd stay to help others. The afternoon passed quickly. Marcus rolled up his sleeves and joined in, following Tiana's lead. As evening approached, the kitchen staff invited them to join the congregation for dinner. They sat at long tables with mismatched chairs, sharing simple meatloaf and potatoes. Children darted between the tables, their laughter mixing with conversation and prayer. Marcus felt something stir deep within him, a warmth he hadn't experienced since losing his wife. It reminded him of childhood Sundays, of his mother's hands folded in prayer, of faith that had slipped away amid business deals and boardrooms. On the drive home, streetlights cast alternating shadows across their faces. Tiana broke the comfortable silence. Do you ever pray, Marcus? He gripped the steering wheel tighter. Not for many years. Would you try, with me? His first instinct was to refuse, to hide behind practiced politeness. But Tiana's open expression held no judgment, only invitation. I wouldn't know where to start. Just talk, she said simply. Like you're speaking to someone who loves you more than you can imagine. Marcus swallowed hard, then nodded. Tiana's quiet voice filled the car with simple words of gratitude, for safety, for friendship, for hope. When she finished, she squeezed his hand once and fell silent. Later that night, Marcus lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling. The day's experiences swirled in his mind. Tiana's transformation at the shelter, the pastor's quiet wisdom, the pure joy of serving others without agenda or acclaim. For the first time in years, words of prayer formed in his heart. His whisper barely disturbed the darkness. God, I don't know if you're still listening, but thank you for sending Tiana. Help me remember what matters. Help me believe again. His words felt clumsy, inadequate, but as sleep approached, Marcus felt a peace he'd almost forgotten existed. The gleaming conference room on the 42nd floor of the Hale Foundation building felt different with Tiana there. Marcus noticed how she studied everything intently, her notebook open before her, occasionally sketching quick images in the margins while listening. Our current allocation leaves little room for new initiatives, droned Richard from finance, clicking through another spreadsheet. What about the children's programs? Tiana's voice was soft but clear. The board members turned, some with barely concealed surprise. Sorry, I just noticed there's nothing specifically for youth art education. Marcus leaned forward. Go on. Well, she flipped through her notebook. At the community center, I saw kids drawing on scraps of paper. They have so much talent, but no supplies, no teachers. Art saved me when I had nothing else. Maybe it could save others too. The room fell silent. Marcus watched his board members exchange glances, but he saw the wisdom in her words. "Let's look at redirecting some funds," he announced. "We'll start with 3 youth art programs in underserved areas." Over the next week, Tiana attended more meetings. She asked questions others avoided, like how to reach kids who couldn't afford bus fare to programs, or why mental health services weren't included in homeless outreach. Her perspective, shaped by real experience, cut through years of corporate thinking. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings, Marcus suggested they walk home through the city. The spring air was mild, and street lights cast a warm glow on the sidewalks. "You handled Davidson's objections brilliantly today," Marcus said, thinking of how she'd calmly explained why weekend programs were crucial for working parents. Tiana laughed, a sound that had become more frequent lately. "He reminds me of my old math teacher. All numbers, no heart." Marcus found himself chuckling. The sound surprised him, warm and genuine. He stopped walking, suddenly struck by the realization. "I haven't laughed like this since Sarah died," he said quietly. "Haven't even wanted to." Tiana's steps slowed. She turned to face him under the glow of a streetlight, her expression thoughtful. "I know what you mean," she said after a moment. "After Mom passed, I built walls so high I forgot how to let anyone in. Trusting people." She shook her head. It felt too dangerous. They stood there, 2 souls who had known deep loss, sharing a moment of understanding that needed no words. The city moved around them, cars passing, people hurrying home, lights changing, but in that bubble of silence, something shifted. A bridge formed over their shared grief, connecting their separate worlds. Finally, they turned toward home. The walk back was quiet but comfortable, each lost in thought but somehow less alone. Later that night, Marcus paused in the doorway of the guest house living room. Tiana sat curled in an armchair, her sketchbook balanced on her knees. The lamp cast a warm circle of light around her, as her pencil moved across the paper with sure strokes. Her face held the peaceful concentration he'd come to recognize, the look she got when creating something beautiful from nothing. He watched her work, struck by how different his world felt now. The emptiness that had echoed through his life since Sarah's death had begun to fill with something new, with thoughtful conversations, unexpected laughter, and the simple joy of helping someone bloom. Tiana had brought color back into his grayscale existence, not by trying to replace what he'd lost, but by showing him life could still hold meaning and beauty. Marcus lingered a moment longer, not wanting to disturb her focus. Then he quietly stepped away, leaving her to her art, and carrying with him the warmth of knowing his home was no longer lonely. The Hale Foundation's main conference room buzzed with anticipation. Tiana stood at the podium, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the microphone. Marcus gave her an encouraging nod from his seat at the boardroom table. "The Youth Art Initiative isn't just about teaching kids to paint," Tiana began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "It's about giving them a voice when they feel voiceless, a purpose when they feel lost." She flipped through her presentation slides, showing photographs of children's artwork from the community center. From the corner of his eye, Marcus noticed Veronica Sinclair's perfectly manicured nails drumming against the polished wood. Her red lips were pressed into a thin line of disapproval. "We've identified 3 locations in underserved neighborhoods," Tiana continued, pointing to a map. "Each center will offer free art supplies, qualified instructors, and..." She paused, drawing a deep breath. "And hope, because sometimes a pencil and paper are all you need to start dreaming again." Several board members nodded, clearly moved by her sincerity. Mr. Patterson, usually stern and unreadable, actually smiled. But Veronica's voice cut through the moment like glass. "How quaint," she drawled. "And exactly how much will these dreams cost our shareholders?" Marcus straightened in his chair. "The budget projections show." "I wasn't asking you, Marcus." Veronica's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure our guest has considered all the financial implications." Tiana didn't flinch. "The 3-year projection shows the program becoming partially self-funding through art sales and community partnerships." She clicked to the next slide, displaying detailed charts. "We've already secured matching grants from 2 major foundations." More board members nodded approvingly. Marcus felt pride swell in his chest as Tiana fielded questions with grace and knowledge. She had worked tirelessly on this presentation, staying up late, studying similar programs, crunching numbers, and refining every detail. But Veronica wasn't finished. Throughout the presentation, she peppered Tiana with cutting remarks disguised as questions, each one designed to undermine and humiliate. When the meeting finally ended, most board members approached Tiana with congratulations, all except Veronica, who swept from the room in a cloud of expensive perfume. Hours later, Marcus was reviewing documents in his penthouse when his elevator chimed. Veronica strode in, uninvited, still in her board meeting attire. "Have you completely lost your mind?" she demanded, tossing her designer handbag onto his couch. "First you parade her around at the gala, now you're letting her run board meetings?" "She's not running anything," Marcus replied coldly. "She's contributing valuable insights to a project she helped create." "Oh, please." Veronica laughed harshly. "She's a street rat playing dress-up, and you're letting her destroy everything you've built. Everything we built together." "We didn't build anything together, Veronica. You made that clear when you chose your social climbing over our engagement. I chose reality over fantasy, just like you need to do now." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "That girl will never belong in our world, Marcus. She'll drag down everything. Your reputation, the foundation's credibility, your legacy." Unknown to either of them, Tiana stood frozen in the hallway outside, having come to drop off some final presentation documents. Each word struck her heart like an arrow. "Get out." Marcus's voice was ice. "And don't ever speak about her like that again. You'll see I'm right." Veronica called over her shoulder as she left. "Some people belong in the gutter." Later that night, alone in the guest house, Tiana sat cross-legged on her bed. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks as she worked in her sketchbook. Her pencil moved across the paper, creating an image of a solitary figure standing in the rain, herself, small and alone against a dark sky. Water dripped onto the page, smudging the graphite, but she couldn't stop drawing, couldn't stop hearing Veronica's words echoing in her mind. "Some people belong in the gutter." Bright lights flooded the Hale Foundation's atrium as reporters gathered for the press conference. Marcus stood at the podium, his voice clear and confident. "Today marks a new chapter for our foundation," he announced. "I'm proud to introduce not just a program, but a partnership." He gestured to Tiana, who walked forward in a simple navy dress that made her look both professional and approachable. "Miss Tiana Johnson isn't a charity case or a publicity stunt. She's the co-creator of our youth art initiative, bringing first-hand experience and invaluable insight to this project." Camera flashes exploded as Tiana took her place beside him. She stood straight-backed, her chin lifted with quiet dignity. The crowd's initial murmurs of surprise turned to genuine interest as she described the program's goals. Suddenly, excited shouts erupted from the back of the room. "Miss Tiana! Miss Tiana! a group of children from the shelter burst through the crowd, led by their caretakers. They wrapped their arms around her waist, their faces beaming with pride and love. Tiana knelt down to hug them properly, tears shining in her eyes. The cameras captured the moment, not of a homeless girl being saved, but of a strong young woman surrounded by the community she helped build. Later that evening, Marcus and Tiana sat across from each other at his dining room table, sharing a simple meal of pasta and garlic bread. Their laughter echoed through the usually quiet penthouse as they recalled the children's surprise appearance. "Did you see their faces?" Tiana asked, her eyes bright with joy. They were so excited. Marcus watched her gesture animatedly as she spoke, noting how naturally she had blossomed into her new role. In the soft dining room light, she looked peaceful, at ease. "Marcus," she said softly, meeting his gaze across the table. "For the first time, I feel like I belong." The morning sun barely touched the city skyline when Marcus' phone erupted with notifications. His stomach tightened as he opened the first news alert. There, splashed across the screen in bold letters, read, "Street Girl's Secret Scheme. The Truth Behind Tiana Johnson." The article, clearly planted by Veronica, painted a vicious picture. It claimed Tiana had targeted wealthy men before, quoted anonymous sources about her manipulative nature, and suggested she was using the youth program to gain control of foundation funds. Marcus's hands shook as he scrolled through more headlines. Each one seemed more cruel than the last. His phone rang. James Chen, his chief financial officer. "Marcus, the stocks in freefall. We're down 15% and dropping. Major investors are pulling out." Before he could respond, another call beeped through, the board demanding an emergency meeting. Within an hour, he sat in the stark boardroom, facing their stern faces. "This is no longer about charity," Marcus Davidson, the head of the board, said gravely. "Wellington Group is preparing a hostile takeover. They'll have enough shares by end of week unless we stem this bleeding." "Meaning what?" Marcus asked, though he already knew. "Cut ties with the girl, today, or everything you've built crumbles." Throughout the day, Tiana wandered the foundation's halls, feeling the weight of accusatory stares. Near the break room, she overheard two employees whispering, "He's going to lose everything because of her. Such a shame. The foundation did so much good before she came along." That evening, tears blurring her vision, Tiana sat at the small desk in the guest house. Her hand trembled as she wrote on cream-colored stationery, "You deserve better than a beggar like me." She placed it carefully on the bed, took one last look around the beautiful room that had briefly been her home, and slipped out into the gathering darkness. When Marcus returned hours later, exhausted from fighting the board, he found the guest house door slightly ajar. His heart already knowing what he'd find, he stepped inside. The note lay there, pristine against the white bedspread, and his heart sank as he read her words. The room felt suddenly cold and empty, just like the space she'd filled in his life. Marcus barely slept that night, tossing and turning as his mind raced with worry for Tiana. As the first rays of dawn broke through his window, he was already dressed and heading out the door. His first stop was the downtown bus terminal, where he showed her photo to ticket agents and passengers alike. "Please," he begged, his voice hoarse, "have you seen this young woman?" Only shaking heads and blank stares met his desperate questions. He drove to every shelter in a 10-mile radius, his normally pristine suit growing wrinkled, his tie loosened at his neck. Each no felt like a punch to his gut. At the park where she used to sleep, he approached homeless individuals gently, asking if they'd seen her. A few remembered her kind smile, but hadn't spotted her recently. By afternoon, exhaustion weighed heavy on his shoulders. His phone buzzed constantly with board members demanding answers, but he ignored them all. Nothing mattered except finding her. Almost as a last resort, he steered his car toward the church shelter where they'd served meals together. His footsteps echoed in the quiet sanctuary as he entered. And there, in the last pew, sat Tiana. Her head was bowed, hands clasped in prayer, looking so small in the vast space. Marcus stood frozen, watching her. The sight of her faith, unwavering despite everything, moved something deep within him. Sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colored light across her face. His heart full, he stepped forward softly and whispered, "I found you." In the hushed sanctuary, Marcus moved closer to where Tiana sat. The small congregation, including Pastor Elijah and several shelter residents, watched silently as Marcus knelt before her pew. "Tiana," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "you're not my charity case. You never were. From that first night at the gala, you were my choice." His eyes glistened with emotion. "In all my years of success, I've never met a soul as beautiful as yours." The wooden pews creaked as church members leaned forward, dabbing at their eyes with tissues. Pastor Elijah smiled warmly, his weathered hands clasped in prayer. "I'm asking you to stand beside me," Marcus continued. "Not just in the foundation, but in my life. You've brought light back into my world." Tiana's hands trembled in her lap. "I've been so scared," she whispered, her voice catching. "Scared I'm not enough for this world, for you." Marcus reached for her hands, holding them steady in his. "You are more than enough, Tiana. You always have been." Tears streamed down Tiana's face as she finally slipped her hand into his, accepting his words and his presence in her life. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conference hall as Marcus stood at the podium, his shoulders straight and his gaze unwavering. Camera flashes dotted the room like fireflies, and reporters leaned forward with their notepads ready. "I stand before you today," Marcus began, his voice clear and strong, "to address the recent accusations against both myself and Miss Tiana Johnson." He paused, looking at Tiana, who stood beside him in a simple navy dress, her head held high. "Our foundation was built on the principle of human dignity. We don't just talk about second chances, we create them. Miss Johnson doesn't just represent our mission, she embodies it." The reporters, usually so quick to interrupt, sat in stunned silence as Marcus continued. His words carried the weight of truth, cutting through weeks of manufactured scandal. In the audience, several board members nodded approvingly. As Marcus finished speaking, something remarkable happened. One person began to clap, then another, until the sound swelled through the hall like a wave. The hostile takeover attempt that had seemed so threatening just days ago crumbled in the face of such authenticity. Investors, moved by Marcus's unwavering integrity, publicly renewed their support. Tiana stood quietly beside him through it all, her presence a testament to the very dignity Marcus spoke of. The applause filled the hall, drowning out the last whispers of doubt. In the weeks following the press conference, Marcus and Tiana poured their energy into creating Art of Hope, a program specifically designed for homeless youth. Their mission was simple but powerful: give children a chance to express themselves through art while receiving education and support. Every day brought new adventures. They visited inner-city schools where Tiana taught art classes, her gentle patience drawing out even the shyest students. At shelters, Marcus spoke with social workers about expanding their services, while Tiana worked with children, helping them create colorful murals that brightened stark walls. Their partnership flourished at art exhibits, where children's artwork hung proudly in professional galleries. Parents cried tears of joy seeing their children's talents celebrated, while potential donors opened their checkbooks, moved by the raw emotion captured in each piece. One evening, after a particularly successful gallery opening, Marcus and Tiana walked home through the city streets. The streetlights cast a warm glow around them, and the spring air felt fresh and full of possibility. Tiana suddenly stopped walking, turning to face Marcus under the golden light. "I've never felt so alive," she whispered, her eyes bright with emotion. "Every day feels like a gift." Marcus's smile was gentle as he looked at her. "You know," he said softly, "Catherine would have wanted this happiness for me. She always believed in second chances." Tiana slipped her hand into his, and they continued walking. She rested her head against his shoulder, their footsteps falling into perfect rhythm as they made their way home through the glowing city night. The Grand Plaza Hotel's ballroom sparkled just as brilliantly as it had that fateful night months ago. Crystal chandeliers cast their warm glow over polished marble floors, but this time something was different. Marcus Hale stood at the entrance, not alone, but with Tiana by his side. She wore a deep blue evening gown that seemed to catch every light in the room. Her hair was elegantly styled, and her smile radiated confidence. Gone was the trembling girl who had once slipped in through the side door. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth. The crowd that had once whispered cruel jokes fell silent as the couple made their way across the ballroom. Pastor Elijah Carter stood at the podium, his gentle presence adding gravity to the moment. He raised his hands in blessing over them both as Marcus approached the microphone. "Tonight," Marcus announced, his voice clear and strong, "we're launching the Tiana Johnson Youth Foundation, with an initial commitment of $50 million to support art education and housing for homeless youth across America." The room erupted in applause, but Marcus wasn't finished. He turned to Tiana, taking both her hands in his. "They told me that night to pick a beauty, not a beggar," he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. "But I found both in you." Tears sparkled in Tiana's eyes as she smiled up at him. The applause swelled around them like a wave, carrying with it the sweet sound of redemption and hope. If this story made you pause, reflect, or even smile, don't forget to subscribe. I post daily, and the next story might be exactly what you need to hear.